wants to go first? You want me to go first, or you want to go first, Jam?
I'll go first, because
You go first.
I don't have a history, so to speak. I was first exposed to Babylon 5 in 2010, late 2010, when I was
Really?
living in
What were you
Glendale.
doing?
Yeah, I I was a kid of the 90s, dude. I was like running around in diapers when this was airing. I don't even remember. Well, it's probably not true. When does this shit air? Babylon 5.
93, 94?
93. Yeah, so I was 5 when this started. Ain't no 5-year-old jammer
That's
not
so
gonna fucking
weird.
sit still for this diplomatic show where a pilot or a captain of a ship. I feel like everything he says is a double entendre just by the way he talks, or the way he facializes his features. But anyways, I remember watching this, and I think
Wait, did you say
even the
double
past.
entendre and then talk about how someone facialized?
I did. That was part of the bit.
That
Anyways,
was intentional? Oh,
uh,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
My bad.
that's fine.
Stepping on your bits.
Stepping on my bits, which is another thing. Okay, so I was living in Glendale at the time, and my roommate, I would come home from work, and he'd be watching fucking Babylon 5. And I remember specifically what bothered me about it. And it didn't apply as much to this pilot, but maybe it's different, or maybe I just perceive it differently or remember it differently. I remember conversations, they're sitting at some bar or whatever, and it's that guy with the headdress with that accent I can't quite place.
Londo?
Um, I don't know names, dude. So yes or no? Is this? Oh, I'm talking like this. That guy. Um, him and another guy talking. There being background people, and literally there being no background sound at all.
I remember
Zero
this. I remember you
background
making
sound.
this complaint before. When were we talking about Babylon 5? Like, this is a months old discussion.
No,
I
this is a
remember
years
you
old
saying
discussion.
that. No, between you and I? Really? Years old?
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is
When were
probably
we
at
talking
least a
about
couple years
Babylon
old.
5?
It could have been a myriad of situations, but we do have a
Okay.
tendency to get off topic, so that's probably in one of those situations.
Okay.
But yeah, I remember those conversations and thinking, oh my God, this looks so boring. I never want to watch this. And to be fair, people in spaceships, it's not something I grew up with, not something that really resonates with me on a core level. So going into this, I was actually really eager to revisit. I'm like, it's been about 13 years since I've seen this. I've grown up. Is this going to be something that I'm intrigued with? And I feel like this kind of fell into two categories for me. It was, yes, it was better than it was back then. But it also kind of fell for me into sort of like the network TV pilot problem, where it's just kind of slow, kind of is hard for me to latch onto, kind of hard for me to follow, because A, either my attention is wandering, or B, maybe because it's just I don't quite follow these types of storylines as easily. So it takes me a few episodes to get my mind into it. So I didn't quite have enough time, but I still found it fairly intriguing, fairly entertaining. I was surprised at how diverse the cast kind of was, to be perfectly honest, as I was watching this.
Oh,
It's
really?
freaking early 90s. In the early 90s, it's crazy. I
Okay.
mean, for the early 90s, I didn't expect that. I expected, what you'd expect in the early
Oh
90s.
my God, look at these people of color and women.
Yeah, I didn't expect it from Hollywood in the 90s. Sue me.
Okay.
Um, anyways,
Well, it'll be funny as we discuss this cast going forward. How you feel
yeah,
about
we'll
that in a
see
minute.
how I feel about that in 5 seconds. Overall, I'm not even sure I could talk about the plot that much, because I feel like I was just trying to cling on to any little thing I have. Like, I thought it was entertaining. I was intrigued to continue watching. And as I was going through it, I was like, okay, I guess I could keep watching this. And Kirsten's like, oh, I definitely want to keep watching. I'm like, all right, cool.
Really?
I mean, oh, Kirsten loves this shit. I mentioned that before. She loves the Star Trek, the original series, specifically the original series. I don't think she really has much exposure to any of the other stuff. So, and we love the Orville and all that. So it's like, she loves it way more than I do. I think it's really good, but she like loves it. So I think this is another thing down her alley. But now I would come to a question, and you can answer it later. Do I follow this, or do I try to jump onto one of the Star Trek series on Paramount?
Why?
Why what?
So I don't
If I
think
have to
I
pick
understand the
one,
question.
if I have to
If you had
pick
to pick
one to
one,
pursue
oh God,
right
that's an
now to
easy.
pursue one at a time.
Oh. Watch all of Strange New Worlds.
Okay. Okay. Good to
That's the
know.
easy answer.
But anyways, so let's talk about your thoughts about this original pilot and original pilot. What the hell's wrong with me? But this pilot for Babylon 5 and why you wanted us to talk about it. Well, that'll be a nice
So I
transition.
want to talk. I want to talk about it. I felt like it was a good time to discuss it. Right? We've heard lots of rumblings about this reboot series that JMS, J. Michael Straczynski, is doing with the CW. Is it on? Is it off? It's hard to know. I think right now it's in a hold status based on the writer's strike and a couple of other things. So that part really sucks. But then we got really good news that Danny and I got a chance to discuss last week, which we're going to talk about a little later in the show. There is an animated movie coming out. And at the time that Danny and I discussed it, we didn't really understand the scope of what this was going to be. But we thought it'd be a good idea to kind of go back and revisit this. Just do a retro review of like the beginning of this and why there are such diehard fans of this series, right? There are usually not a lot of shows, and certainly back then in 1993, there weren't space operas that, you know, that had nothing to do with Star Trek that lasted. And so to have this one not only start, but finish its entire run with a single vision was a huge deal. And so that's why I thought it was important and fun to have a conversation about. My thoughts going back on it. So I was not 5 years old. I think I was 11. I was 10 or 11 when this came out. And
I'll tell you what, 11-year-old Jammer wouldn't have stood for this shit either. 11-year-old Jammer was too busy watching Dragon Ball Z to wait around for people talking and nothing happened.
You got to diversify your bonds.
I'm letting you know. My attention span is the culprit here.
Yeah, listen, I like both. I watched both. Everything had a place and a time, and there was something about this. And you know what? I can tell you exactly what it was. When I was a kid, my mom and I talked about politics all the time, and that's all this is, right? So this is just a ton of politics, plus all the aliens. So you're telling me I get to sit here and listen to politics, but also get to see all of the aliens and all of the space battles and all this other stuff. Like, I'm in. And so this just worked for me on multiple levels.
Yeah.
But
I
going
definitely
back
was not
to
talking politics with my mom at age 11.
It was really weird. I realized how strange that was going back in time. How strange that was. But
I got your back on that, Jonesy. It's not that strange, man. It's not that strange.
Thank you.
It's why Battlestar was so good. Like the reimagining, like just mainline that shit.
All politics. Not all, but like a ton of politics and space battles.
I like politics in my stories. I just didn't when I was 11 or 5. So that's where I'm coming from.
So going back to watch this, it's weird because I anticipated that it would be rough. I just didn't remember how rough. And as the CGI,
it's got that 90s
rough.
90s network sheen.
It is 90s AF. And I remembered it, and maybe I just blocked it out. I don't know. But what I do recall that carried through this from this onward were the strong performances of Peter Jurassic as Lando Malari, who I think that's what you're referring to when you said the headdress. So he's kind of bald, but he has like this hair that flares out in the back. And then Andreas Katsalas as Jakar. Those two characters not only carried... Jakar was the guy who said... he was talking to the telepath, and he said, hey, we don't have any telepaths in our society. So it'd be really great if we could do a cross-pollination of our genetics.
Oh.
We could take embryos, we could do that. But the direct method is far more efficient. I just don't know what your pleasure
Yeah.
threshold is. Like, I fucking love that scene. But also, like, his relationship with Londo Malari carried this in not just I loved it. It's a fantastic relationship. So it was fun getting to see the kind of genesis of it here. And
Right.
seeing Peter Jurassic's just fantastic acting chops as he talks about the fall, not the fall, just kind of like the decadence of the Centauri Republic and how it's kind of fallen, at least in his eyes. And I just, it is hard to watch this episode and not think about what's coming. And what's coming is so good that it was easy for me to give a lot of the missteps in this. But I
don't consider them missteps. I consider them just, they were part of the time. The budget was small. The CGI was at its beginning state. It looks like it's out of the Cartoon Network show Reboot, if you remember that.
Oh yeah, I do.
And also it has that network aspect where, and this is like, there's a moment where I was like, oh, this feels so 90s when, right before they cut to a commercial break, the music goes done and then quickly fades out for the commercial break. And I'm just like, oh, I hate that. I remember hating this so much when watching TV.
So when I say missteps, there are just like these really strange writing things that happen. Like there's a scene where where the ambassador Kosh is on the floor and they're like, call security. It's like the security chief is standing right in front of you. Right? Like there are weird moments like that happen. There's a moment where the doctor is talking about how he saw the face of Kosh and he's like looking at the camera instead of talking to the person that asked the question. So like a couple of weird things like that. Plus, like, Kyle would, if he had rewatched this episode, would see like these really weird squad tactics that they're doing where they're like, yeah, don't send all of security to go after this guy. It's just going to be the two of us. We're going to go do this. We're going to go get this person.
They're pulling a Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, and they're doing this weird walk down the hall, and I'm like, this is strange. But
it's one of those things where it's like no research was ever done in these shows, and people are just like living in a bubble. They're like, hey, TV show, this is good enough. We'll just go.
I mean,
go.
It's
all about
80% solution.
Expediency.
Is it as bad as military stuff Ryan Johnson did in The Last Jedi?
That didn't bother me at all. So what I think is weird about this, also you have like weird narrative stuff where they're doing things for just our benefit, right? Like there's a telepath who's like, hey, what happened to the other stations? And he's like, well, this station did this and this station did this. Like, that's like me having to explain to somebody 9/11. Right? These $1 trillion stations were either sabotaged or somehow failed or just fucking vanished. And
I thought that was a funny thing, though. I thought that was cool mythology, though. I actually was intrigued. I was like, ooh, I want to hear what happened to Babylon 4.
It's cool mythology, but what I'm saying is like the delivery method, the way that it happens is weird. Yeah. So when I talk about missteps, like this is kind of like the spectrum of things I'm talking about. And again, I think part of that is what you already described. It's part and parcel to just that 90s fucking sheen.
Yeah. I just, when that scene happened, I remember thinking like, wouldn't that be funny if he turned away? She's like, I was talking about the Babylon part. I don't care about the 5. Just why is it called Babylon? I don't understand that part of it.
So
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay, so I mean, basically, what I could see the appeal here, as someone who maybe this just doesn't strike me yet. I'm interested to give it more time because these types of shows, it takes me, frankly, a season at least to get into, for these types of shows. So I'll go back and I'll give it a shot. Maybe after Strange New Worlds, who knows? Maybe before Strange New Worlds. But yeah, I could see the appeal for other. It's one of those things where like I'm happy you love it. I'm happy there are people who love it. Just innately, it is not for me. but I'm still gonna give it a shot because I understand the appeal. So it falls squarely into that category for me.
Yeah. As someone who knows where the story is going, I'm kind of excited to have somebody else watch it because the appeal, I think, of this show overall, at least to me, is having that singular vision throughout the course of this show, because a 5-year plan for a show was abnormal back then.
Yeah.
And JMS had this entire thing plotted out, knew how it was going to go, had a very strong vision for how he wanted to go. And that carries throughout the entire series to the point where he had like trap doors for characters, right? Like he knew so much of what he wanted to do with the show that if something happened with an actor or something like that, he would know how that person was going to be replaced in the story. And so that's like the level of detail and the characterizations that were happening going on, and it was a lot of fun to watch these characters. And to me, more than the space battles, it was just a very, very good character-driven show.
That's fair. I mean, hopefully, I'm really hoping, at this point, having seen the CG, that we aren't reliant on the action of the space battles in order to be intrigued by this show.
It gets better.
I'm sure. I'm sure you think it does. I don't know if it really does. We'll see.
So here's the thing. It does get better. I know that because the way it's weird, the way this episode is positioned. We watched this on Tubi, just for full disclosure. The episode is listed as a bonus episode. Remastered. And I think the other reason, and so Nick asked a question on Discord, like, why is it listed as a bonus episode? I think because there was a TNT reissued version of this pilot episode, and I think that's part of the reason why. Now, wouldn't it have just been easier to still call it the pilot and have it be at the beginning? Yeah, sure. The point of what I'm saying is, because it's listed as a bonus at the end of the first season, the first episode of season 2 started playing immediately thereafter. And so there's like this marked difference between what you're seeing as CGI between like the pilot episode and season 2. Like the sets are different, the uniforms are like everything is so much better between the pilot episode and season 2.
Okay. Well, I know that we're back in 2023, and news arrived, as you mentioned, that we are getting an animated movie from